Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at the Equal-i-zer Weight Distribution Hitch with built-in sway control. If you're unsure about what a weight distribution hitch is, it simply uses physics with having tension here on our bars to take that tongue weight that's normally pressed down on a vehicle and just kind of springs that back up, and that's going to translate to a less squatting vehicle with less raise in the front, which translates to not only a higher weight capacity when towing, but also better turning, better stopping, and just overall less wear on the vehicle as you're going down the road. The way that it works, it evenly distributes the weight over the axles of the towed vehicle and the trailer. It's going to give you stability and control while doing that. And it's really just going to make a level ride for not only the towed vehicle, but also the trailer. And also with the integrated 4-point sway control, it limits the side-to-side movement. So if you ever have a trailer that's kind of swaying back and forth, the friction on the steel-on-steel contact where the bars meet on the L bracket is going to eliminate that or significantly reduce that, which is really nice. Now, other weight distribution hitches you may see have chains to get that tension built up, and that's not the case here. It uses a spring bar that goes onto that L bracket to take some of that stress away and translate it to that nice and even ride. It's also separate from other weight distribution systems out there because there's no drilling or welding on required to get this in place. It uses a clamp-on bracket that goes around the frame, and it can be adjusted, so that way if you need to work around maybe propane tanks, battery boxes, toolboxes, or generators, you have a little bit of play to be able to do that. Weight distribution systems are going to be great for a trailer that you use consistently. If you're someone that swaps from trailer to trailer or a different tow rig to different tow rig, that's not really the case here. This is for someone that consistently tows the same thing over, and you're going to set it up for that accordingly. So it really is a great way to get the most out of your tow rig, just get a better driving experience for that, but also to keep your trailer from swaying around. It's just going to really use physics to squeeze out the most potential out of your tow rig as well as your trailer to give you the best towing experience. Another great thing about this system in particular compared to some of the other weight distribution systems is some of them don't allow you to back up. This one you can back up with no problem. Now, taking this out, I've actually never driven with weight distribution. I've seen weight distribution in action, and you might hear it in action as well. There's that friction of the clunking, and that is one of the downsides of some of the weight distribution, is you are going to get that. But just remember that's the friction, making sure that you're getting the best towing experience. And being that this is a Highlander towing a decently heavy trailer, it's doing pretty well, and you would never know because there's not that squat. And a lot of times we put a lot of suspension enhancements in place to eliminate that squat, but this is kind of doing the same thing, and that's just going to make a better towing experience overall. Now, keep in mind, you are going to have that clunking along. You probably get used to it, maybe not your passengers, but again, this is a great system. This thing is towing right now like there's nothing behind it, and that's saying a lot. And you'll hear that clunking when you make the turns, but honestly, a lot of that you're not going to hear if you're making long distance highway driving. You're not going to hear it too often. Just know that when you do make those turns in town, it's going to be there. Now, again, I'm getting awesome results here. The car is just, it's really not even phasing it, and you wouldn't know there's a trailer except for that clunking noise going on. And I put myself in a bind here, but it's really cool. I can put this in reverse, and it's not a problem. If that noise is something you don't want to deal with, or if you maybe plan on getting a different trailer or having multiple trailers, something that you can look at, a new system that's come out is the B&W Continuum, and that does take all of that noise away, and you can adjust it to whatever trailer you have. So that might be something if you want to buy one weight distribution and never really have to worry about getting another. That's a great system. It's quite a bit different in the way that it works. And I think you're not going to maybe get a better towing experience. It's adjustable, whereas this one, you really do set it for the weight of the trailer and for the tow vehicle that you're going to have, and that's what you're going to stick with. So if you have a trailer that you plan on keeping forever or a tow vehicle that you're going to match up with that, totally fine. This is going to be an awesome option, and I think you're really going to be happy with it. You can adjust the tilt in the head by removing washers or adding washers to the spacer rivet, and that's going to give you that tilt up or down, so you can really custom dial this in to your tow vehicle and trailer combo. Now, being able to adjust those washers on the pivot bolt means that it's going to make it tilted to be able to hook it up and get your arms hooked up a little bit easier. And a lot of times you can do this by hand, by using your jack to kind of raise that up to unspring the weight to get your bars in place, but also included is a tool here that allows you to put this in the hole of the L bracket, pry it up, and it's going to drop this bar in place. These spring bars are not made out of spring steel. They're actually made of a chromium molybdenum alloy steel, so it has a high tensile strength for extreme durability. It also has dexterity, which allows it to move around, but also return it back to its original form without becoming deformed. The pliability is going to be really important. It's going to take that bounce from the trailer out and just kind of absorb that as you go down the road. Now there's 4-point sway control, and 2 of those points are going to be done here on the head of the weight distribution hitch, and that's because there's downward pressure from the weight of the trailer being put on the head, but there's upward pressure from those bars fighting against it. So that kind of keeps everything in place. But also the friction that occurs from steel on steel friction is going to eliminate the rest of that sway. So that gives us the 4 points. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4 all working together to make sure that your trailer is not swaying going down the road. The head of the weight distribution attaches to a shank that can be used in a rise or drop position, so that's going to allow you to account for a bunch of different vehicles. So whatever you may have to tow your trailer, like a Highlander like we have today, we're able to put that in a drop. If you have something with a little lower, you can put that in a raise, but either way, it's going to account for a decent amount. So we still have room to go here, so if you have a truck, that should match up. Now something that's really neat too, if you look at your hitch on your vehicle, you do want to make sure that it's capable of weight distribution, but you'll see that you're going to gain a little bit of weight towing capacity. A lot of times it's going to bump it up a decent amount. So take a look at your hitch, make sure that it's capable obviously of towing that trailer first, and then choosing your weight distribution system is going to be key. You want to match up to the trailer that you have when it's fully loaded. So don't just take a look at the specs of the trailer, load it up like you would going down the road, and then choose that system accordingly. You also want to make sure that you're picking up the kit with the right ball. These can be available with a 2-inch ball or a 2 5/16. You can pick those up separately, so not to worry. And something else you might want to consider is there's a special socket to be able to get this ball torqued down. It does not come pre-torqued, so you might want to take a look at that as well. Everything that you see in black is going to be a dip steel, so that's going to hold up for corrosion. So if you're taking this on a bunch of road trips and it sees a lot of road grime, this is going to hold up to it long term. Same goes with all of the hardware as well as the ball that's included. Now, a great part too is the installation on this isn't terribly hard to do. Really, it comes down to just making sure you get it dialed in the first time, and sometimes that'll take some adjustment. You may be uncoupling your trailer, hooking it back up, taking measurements, but once you get it dialed in, you're good to go each time. We'll walk you through all the steps to make sure you get yours installed, and it doesn't matter what weight capacity you have, it's pretty much going to be the exact same steps. So follow along and we can get yours installed. Now, to get your weight distribution set up, there's going to be a few different steps, but really it comes down to making sure that you're on flat level ground with your trailer as well as your tow vehicle, and you're going to want your trailer as level as possible. So with your jack, you're going to want to measure the front of the frame as well as the back of the frame of the vehicle while it's fully loaded to get it perfectly level, and that way we have a good basis to build off of. So we'll get a quick measurement. So from the ground to the frame of our trailer, we're coming in right at 13 inches. So I'll go to the back and measure the frame there as well. On the rear of our trailer, our frame is flush with this trim, so we're right at 13 inches. Our trailer's nice and level. Next, you're going to need to install the ball on your weight distribution hitch. Now, it does not come pre-installed, and we actually opted for a 2 5/16 ball on ours. So you want to make sure, obviously, it's going to match the coupler on your trailer as well as the weight capacity of your weight distribution hitch. And to get this torqued down can be a little bit tricky, and it might require some specialty tools, but we'll go ahead and get that installed. It's going to require a pretty heavy-duty torque wrench and maybe a specialty socket that you may not have, but I'll show you a quick tip on how to get yours installed once you get all those proper tools. Sometimes it's really hard to get the leverage that's required to get this torque down. It is printed in the instruction manual, the torque setting you'll be using. And to just get a spot to be able to do this, rather than putting in a vise, it can be tricky, but what we'll do is we'll just loosely install the bolts on our weight distribution head onto the shank, and we're gonna turn the shank over in the hitch of our vehicle. And this is gonna be the point that's gonna hold it up for us. We want the ball facing towards the passenger side. That way when we tighten, we're able to push down rather than pull up. And we'll just take our split washer and our nut and just kind of get these started. You'll see that there's flat sides on both sides of the ball, and that's going to allow us to get an 1 3/4 inch wrench on the head of the ball to keep this straight. It's not super crucial, but it's nice to keep that head in place as we're putting that torque on there. That way it's not spinning around. So an 1 3/4 inch wrench will go here. So since this is a specialty tool, in order to get this installed, you may have to take it somewhere, or you can pick up this socket here at eTrailer separate if you want to do this on your own, or if you ever plan on swapping out the ball, you will need to pick this up. Now, as I mentioned, the torque setting is really high on this, and that's because it needs to stay in place, obviously, for the lifespan of towing that heavy-duty trailer that you may have. So if you don't have a large torque wrench, you may have to go out and rent one. This is a pretty large, this is a 1/2 inch drive. So we're going to be using this as well as keeping our wrench in place to get this torque down. You're probably going to want an extension as well to get this in place, make it a little bit easier. Now this is cumbersome. You might need an extra set of hands here, but with the wrench, I'm going to make sure that I keep this aligned to where that's nice and straight, and then we're just going to start cranking down until our torque wrench tells us we've reached our limit. There we go. We got our click on our torque wrench. So we've officially installed the ball on our weight distribution hitch. Next, we need to take our tow vehicle and back it up perfectly square with the trailer. And you'll want to leave yourself a little bit extra room to be able to get the hitch in place and start assembling it. But we do need to get a reference point on height from the coupler to the ball. So I'll back this up, try to get maybe about 5 or 6 inches of a gap away from there, and that way we can get everything installed. Take our shank, and this can go in a rise or a drop position. There's going to be some adjustment to where the head of the ball is going to be. Obviously, we have a few different options. So I think on ours, we might be able to get away with the drop position, but best way to figure that out is just kind of take the rest of the head here and put it onto the shank. And what we're going to be looking for is trying to get this within about 0 to 1 inch of the height of the coupler. So I think in our drop position and kind of right here is going to be a good option for us. So I'll pin this in, and then I'm going to throw some bolts on here and we'll get that installed. Before we get the hitch head onto our shank, we're going to want to take our spacer rivet, and there's going to be washers that are going to kind of give you adjustability to angle this. Now, they say to start with 6. With this vehicle setup and from just previous experience, I'm going to start with 8. It depends on, obviously, your trailer. Now, when choosing the spot to mount this up, you're going to want this at least level with the coupler or maybe 1 inch. So that 0 to 1 inch gap is kind of what you're looking for. Pretty happy with this. So we'll take our large bolts with the flat washer and slide this through. And then on the back side, we're also going to put a flat washer, a split washer, and then our nut. We're just going to hand tighten this for now. We don't have to get too crazy. Now we're going to go down to our angle set bolt that's down here. It's going to be a 5/8. You can either use a socket, or I have a ratcheting wrench here. And as we tighten this, it's going to extend it, and we're going to want that rivet to press against the top of our shank. So as I tighten this down, we should see that rivet start to crank down a little bit. I don't think we need to get too crazy here. We just want it nice and snug. Something to take in consideration is not all vehicles are created the same. So if you have a spare tire, if you have bumper guards or anything along those lines that can limit the turning radius, you might want to take a look at getting a longer shank. There's an 18-inch version available. It's just going to bump that out to give you that clearance. Now we need to measure out where our sway brackets are going to go. And so we're going to go from the center of our coupler. So we'll just kind of make a mark here with a chalk marker. And the minimum is 27 inches. So on a V-nose trailer like this, it can get a little bit tight here. So I'll measure back, and it's going to go to the center of the bolt. So ours is pretty tight here. You can see as this goes back, that bolt needs to be right at 27 inches. So what we did is we had to make a small notch here. We just kind of mocked this up, and that way we can get this back to that 27-inch mark. So with that kind of notched out, it was just enough to put us exactly where we need to be. Both brackets are going to be evenly spaced out, that 27 inches on our trailer. Now it comes down to, you may have to move a few things. If you have propane tanks or a battery box that's going to get in the way of your brackets, you may have to relocate those to get your brackets in that measurement. Now, depending on the style of coupler you have is going to determine how you're going to mount up your link plates. We just have a standard top-mounted coupler. If you have an underslung or an upside-down reversed one, you're going to need to adjust accordingly in the instructions from what we're doing, but pretty easy installation here. So one of our plates has a recessed portion, the other one's just flat, and what we're going to want to do is the two that are right next to each other, we'll take our smaller bolts, and those just drop in just like that. And then we'll grab our larger bolts, and we'll take one of those bolts and put it in this top recessed portion. We have the 4 here, but that's really going to come down to how thick the frame of your trailer is. So what we'll do is we'll take this, put it on the outside. We'll then take our plate here, slide this over, and then put the bolt through the closest we can. We don't want any gap. So ours, we really only have one option here, but if your frame is smaller, go up as high as you can to make sure that it's nice and buttoned up. So we'll take our other bolt, pass that through. And then we'll take our split washers and the regular nuts. Do not use the nylon lock nuts that are included. We're just gonna get this hand tight for now and kind of make sure they're at that 27 inches that we have on our other side, and just make sure that we have it all lined up exactly where we need it. Now I double checked my measurement. I'm exactly where I need to be on that 27 inches. So just make sure that your plates are perfectly vertical and even with each other, and that the bolt should be perpendicular to the frame. Don't have it at an angle, obviously. And pinch the plates together, and then you're going to want to evenly tighten these from top to bottom, just by hand for now. And then to get these snug down, we're going to use a 3/4 inch wrench first, and then we're going to come back with our torque wrench to get them torqued down to the specifications that are found in the instruction manual. So again, just kind of evenly tighten, do a little on the bottom, a little on the top. That way we have it nice and even when we torque it down. Now, those bolts that we pass through are going to be the mounting point for our L bracket, and we're going to be using the 2 middle holes on this. So just drop that in place here. We then have our nylon lock nuts. The instructions say to firmly tighten these in place by hand, so the L bracket's firmly in place. If you have that grip strength, more power to you, but I'm just going to take my 3/4 inch ratcheting wrench here and just snug these down. I'm not going to get too crazy here, but just to make sure that it's firmly in place. Now in the instruction manual, there's going to be a calculation table here that this is where we're going to put our measurements. So we're going to measure our towed vehicle before even hooking up. We're also going to be measuring it with it coupled up without the arms in place, and then we'll also do a final measurement of it with the arms in place. So we'll go through, we'll get all these measurements and make sure you're marking these down. Our first measurement, we're going to go to our front wheel well and measure in the center. You can use the center cap of your wheel as a reference and go to the top of your wheel well. So ours is looking like we're coming in at about 32 and about 3/8, give or take. So I'll measure the other side, get the difference, and mark that down in our chart. To raise up our trailer so we can get this coupled up, we'll back up our tow vehicle and get this all hooked up, and that way we'll have the tongue weight resting on the vehicle. Lower this trailer down, get it coupled. Make sure to take all the weight off the trailer so we get all that tongue weight. You're going to see the vehicle squatting quite a bit, so if you really want to get a good visual representation of what weight distribution does, you can also measure the back just to see the difference. But we'll head up to the front where it's probably raised up quite a bit, so we'll get those measurements and mark that down on the next slot. So initially, the average was 32 and a quarter. Right now we're looking at about 33 and a quarter. So it's raised that front end up by an inch, and that's gonna really cause a lot of issues as far as steering, braking, and just overall, the vehicle's not gonna track down the road like you want it or drive as well as you want. So go ahead and mark down your measurements on that second slot. While the trailer is still coupled up, we're gonna get our bars in place. So make sure that the sticker is facing the outside on both sides. We'll just slide this in, and then we'll get our pin put in place. And now we need to use the jack to kind of raise this back up to the point where we can get our arms on the L brackets. You may need to use the tool to pry that up. So I'll start raising this up and see where we get. Few things to point out to get your bars in place. A few things that we had to do in particular with our trailer was our bars were going to make contact with the bottom, so we dropped this down one slot just to kind of get that clearance here. But you want to raise your jack up enough to where you can kind of slide this in, and there is going to be paint buildup in here in the beginning. So if you're having to fight to swing it out or in, don't be surprised. You may have to kind of give it a little bit of extra push to get that in place. But really, you should be able to raise that jack up enough to drop that in place. We had to use a block because our jack wasn't tall enough. So if you have to do that to accomplish it, by all means. But once you have this on the bracket, you'll just take this L pin here, drop this in place, and that should drop in here, and that's going to keep our bars in place here. Another thing to take in consideration is where your L bracket is, you should have at least 3 inches. And that way when you're turning, it's not gonna unhinge or slide out here. We obviously don't have an issue because we're at the minimum, depending on your trailer, double check to make sure that you have that. If not, you're gonna need to move your brackets to where you have that 3-inch gap. So we'll go ahead, we're gonna take all the weight off the jack, and then we can take our measurements and see the difference it made. Now immediately out the gate, the rear is definitely not squatting as much as it was before, so that's definitely going to be a good sign. Let's head up to front, get those measurements, and see exactly how much it changed it. So measuring it here, the last time we checked, we had 33 3/8 measure between the two. So measuring now, we're at 32 1/8, which is actually really good because our initial, even with nothing coupled on there, was 32 1/4. So we're looking really good here. I'll double check the other side, average that out, and then mark down what we have. Now with all your measurements, there's gonna be a formula that you follow, and that's going to determine where you're at in the target range, which is gonna be at 50% to 100%. After doing ours, we're at 88%, very happy with that, so it's definitely working. Now if you fall into a range that doesn't go in between that 50 to 100%, there's a few ways you can alter it, and that's gonna be by adjusting the amount of washers that you have in the head, so you can remove those down, and you can also adjust where the L brackets are. So between those two, you may need to play around a little bit to get within that range, but that's the thing, once you get it set up, you're gonna be good to go for every time you hook up to that trailer. Now something else that you may want to check is going to be the trailer pitch. So you're going to measure the frame of the front and the back and make sure it's at a good length. You obviously don't want it tucked up or back, either way. And to adjust that, you would just simply adjust where the head is on the shank by moving it up or down one slot. Now we're happy with everything, so we need to go through, torque down our hardware. Now we'll just go through and torque all these down. These are going to be a pretty high torque setting, so if you've torqued down the ball, you'll have a torque wrench that can accomplish this. It'll be 1 1/8. You're going to need a wrench and a socket to accomplish that. We also need to get our L bracket bolts all torqued down as well, our socket bolts, and also to adjust the pitch down here, it should be against the metal already, but a half turn after it's against it is what we're looking for that pitch bolt. So go through, get these all torqued down properly. And that was a look at the Equal-i-zer Weight Distribution Hitch with built-in sway control.